The objective: to deliver the NBA to you like no other. News, play breakdowns, power rankings, storylines you never hear talked about anywhere else. It's all straight shots here, fired by straight shooters. S and Gunn. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. You've caught me on an off day, folks. You guys have caught me on a day that is not so good. I'm ready to fight. It has been a wild day moving and shifting boxes and doing all those things at home. And not to mention, there were some, to put it lightly, there were some ridiculous snubs in the All-Star reserve announcements. We have a lot to get to. Today in the podcast, in the Objective Basketball Podcast world, here with my co-host here, Lauren Gunn. How you doing, first of all? Before we get into this, how are you feeling? How was your day?
In a related NBA sense, but a non-All-Star related sense, I am also not. You caught me on an off day because, and we're going to get to it.
Yeah.
But the Christian Wood of it all is just rapidly not going well. So
not going well.
I am not doing well.
You're right. We are both, our respective teams that we cover are not doing the best. They are,
to say the least.
To say the least, yes. So without further ado, we'll get into it. But I just want to get this out the way. Think you know what way it's going to go. Make your bet at Sports Interaction. As much as we love hockey, we are looking forward to one of the biggest days in sports, Super Bowl 57, and Sports Interaction has you covered pregame, in-game, and prop bets. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN, or in Ontario, download the app using the QR code on your screen. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Listen, Lauren, if I had a bet to make coming into tonight, I would have bet a considerable amount of money that Pascal Siakam would be an NBA All-Star.
I would have too, and I believe when we were doing our reserves, we said he was a lock.
Yes.
I believe we both agreed that he was a lock.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there's been a lot of tweets going around. We know the tweet that you say, he's the first guy to average 25, 8, and 6 in NBA history to not make an All-Star game. So we'll go through this now, and we'll kind of talk about the rest of the list. There is a few snubs, I would say, and just a couple of players that I think it's so hard to digest this in real time and try to explain it in a way other than it being freaking ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of inconsistencies with the way people voted. Obviously, the reserves are judged by the coaches. The coaches make these decisions. But at the end of the day, I really think the coaches got some of these wrong. And it's not for the fact that like some of these guys are just plain snubs. I think there were some inconsistencies in the list. For some players, they decided to count and factor in games played. For example, James Harden didn't make it, probably because of the fact that he missed over a month of basketball. Whereas Jaren Jackson Jr. missed a considerable amount of time, I believe the first 20-plus games of the season, and now he's an All-Star. Anthony Davis, he missed a considerable amount of time. He's not going to be an All-Star, even though before he got hurt, he was an All-NBA player. So I think there was a bit of inconsistency with the way they decided certain things. The other thing is, for some players, team record went into consideration. For some players, team record absolutely did not go into consideration. How DeMar DeRozan ended up on the list, but Pascal Siakam didn't, to me, is something I'm dumbfounded by. So we'll go through and we'll talk. We'll start with the East first. The reserves are Joel Embiid, Bam Adebayo, Julius Randle, DeMar DeRozan, Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and Tyrese Halliburton, which means there's no Pascal Siakam, no James Harden, no Jimmy Butler. For you, obviously, who picked Trae Young, no Trae Young in the All-Star game. I think of the players that surprised me the most, I would probably say it's DeMar DeRozan. I think DeMar, look, I'm a guy who has been watching the Raptors for a very long time. Obviously got a chance to kind of watch DeMar develop into the player that he is today. I think it's awesome that he's still just as good, even at his age, and he is having a pretty good year. He is the main reason the Bulls are staying alive, if you will. He's been awesome. Levine has had a down year, and DeRozan has been kind of carrying him by their bootstraps. I think DeRozan should have got recognition. I just don't think that he should have been in the conversation for All-Star, especially when you consider the defensive side of the ball, especially when you consider the inconsistencies that he has on that side of the ball. I don't think he should have made it over some of these other guys. The other guys being Pascal Siakam, one of them, Jalen Brunson being the other, and I think you could have an argument for James Harden as well, even though I understand the game's missed argument.
Right.
For me, it comes down to Pascal. Because I just think it's absolutely ridiculous that a player who is the engine, the lifeblood of a team, a guy who is so impactful for this Raptors team, if you take out Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors, they are probably a bottom 4 team in this East, in the NBA. That's how bad they are without him. If you were to remove what Pascal Siakam does for this team, it is akin to removing some of the best players in the NBA just because of how big of an engine he is for the Toronto Raptors. Now, I was having a debate with someone on Twitter just now. I was Twitter fingers. I was clacking. I was writing paragraphs, Lauren. Absolute paragraphs. I'm sure some people are privy to that right now who are listening to it. And the argument we got into was Julius Randle or Pascal Siakam. And I think the way I would argue about this is, look, Julius Randle, if you take Julius Randle out of New York, I still think that the player you would pick for being an all-star in New York is Jalen Brunson. I think he is the one that makes them go. I think the impact that Randle has and the way that he's looked this season, albeit he is having a very impressive season, and I think he did deserve recognition, but it's because of Jalen Brunson. It's because of him that he looks more comfortable as a scorer, as a secondary option, as a person who can kind of create his own shot off the bounce. And now Brunson is the one setting the table for him to go and get those shots. On the other side of it, I don't think Randle is as good of a defender as Pascal Siakam is. And I think Siakam has shown that consistently. I will also say the Raptors are way worse without Siakam than the Knicks are when you take Julius Randle off the court. I understand that, look, Julius Randle's true shooting percentage is better. Some of the EPMs and win shares and whatnot kind of favor Julius Randle. But I will say in terms of sheer impact, if you're watching the games, if you're looking for who is out there looking like an all-star and absolutely dominating, I would say Pascal Siakam over Julius Randle, no question. Now, to be fair, I think that Jalen Brunson also should have been over Julius Randle, and then there's a different conversation to be had there. But I think if you had to debate between Randle, DeRozan, and Siakam, the answer is Siakam for All-Star. And like the James Harden conversation is a different thing as well. I mean, he's leading the league in assists, Lauren. The man is on the second, I believe either the second or the third best team in the Eastern Conference. I don't know. Them and the Bucks flip consistently. But he's one half of one of the most unstoppable plays in basketball in the James Harden, Joel Embiid pick and roll. He is one of the main reasons for that team looking like they have. We did a podcast on them last week talking about why they're surging. I really see no reason why James Harden isn't an all-star this year. I think to me, I keep going back to DeMar and Randle. Those are the two guys that kind of, they don't make much sense to me. I see a lot of hate on Drew Holiday on the timeline. I see some people saying, I don't understand how Drew Holiday made it. I get it. I understand why people would say that Holiday probably shouldn't have made it, but he has looked very good this last month. He has been crucial to kind of keeping the Bucks afloat with Giannis. I can see why people would put him on there.
Right.
But I also agree. I think those are the guys that are omissions to me. What do you think, man? I'm honestly, I'm sorry. I had to go on that spiel because I'm with you, and those are the three guys that I'm looking at as well. And I'm with you on, I kind of understand the Drew Holiday.
personally, I mean, obviously he wasn't a pick for me. And he's one of the three guys that I don't want to say, oh, I have a problem with that. Yeah. But sometimes I do have a little bit of an issue with, it's hard because when we were going through our reserves, I was like, well, winning is a big part of it. And if you're a team that's at the top of your conference, having two guys, I think De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis, that was something that I was all in on because the numbers were there. But then with the Bucks and with Drew Holiday, he's kind of, they're comparable situations. And so I can't be for it in one situation and not for it in another. But I do think that Jalen Brunson, while, yes, I agree with you, if there's any New York Knick that should have been in the All-Star game, I absolutely think it should have been Jalen Brunson. And I think you hit it right on the head by saying a lot of Julius's success has come because of Jalen Brunson setting the table. And let's not forget, you had the majority of Knicks Twitter looking at trade scenarios for Julius Randle for like a good bit of the season.
Right.
And so,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying, and that doesn't really mean anything, but when you're looking around at Pascal and Jalen and some of these guys that didn't make it, you're kind of just like, huh? I don't get it. And I also am a very like, to me, there's a big balance between advanced stats, analytics, and then just a sheer eye test. I don't think you can put, the majority of your stock in an eye test, but to me, I absolutely am someone that thinks that there is value in the eye test and that you can't just go all numbers. And so in that sense, I think Jalen Brunson passes both the increase in numbers, the advanced stats, and the eye test. I think Pascal, I mean, what he means to that team, and you said it all, what he means to Toronto and what Toronto looks like if you take him away and take him out of that picture, there's a lot that goes into that eye test. And when you're looking at that versus someone like Julius Randle, Julius, phenomenal season. I really like what he's had to say, how he's carried himself, how he's contributed. I think he's been great, but I don't like the pick. I really, truly don't understand how you can leave Pascal Siakam out of the All-Star game. I'm kind of speechless, if I'm being quite honest with you.
That's what I felt like at the top of this podcast. I
don't know how to pinpoint how year after year it just seems like this is the reaction every time. Mm-hmm. And I know guys are always going to get left out until, maybe something changes. I don't know. But I don't understand how you can have the inconsistencies in voting. And so that's what kind of leaves me speechless because, if the coaches are voting, they're all going to have different perspectives. They're all going to have different priorities, whatever the case may be. But to me, James Harden not being on the list is James Harden and Pascal are the two that I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't know that I'll ever get it. And frankly, the arguments, I don't really want to hear them. I think those two absolutely should be on the All-Star team. And I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, look, I think to your point, the league is extremely talented. All these guys are all-star level players. This is not to like rain on Randall's parade or anybody's really. Like I said, look, I'm a huge DeMar DeRozan fan. I've been following his game since he was number 10 out of Compton. Like this is like, trust me, we've been watching these guys for a very long time. Julius Randle, he was a Laker, and I was a huge fan of his game. The day that he hurt himself as a rookie was a really bad day for me because I was really looking forward to him being a massive, like, rookie of the year type player. To see him evolve, figure things out throughout the years, that type of stuff is awesome to me. As a basketball fan, you really appreciate that. And for him to have a rocky season last year and figure it out this year, I mean, it's great to see a player kind of just work through the kinks of their own game. It's dope. But when you come to look, at the end of the day, some of these guys bank on these all-star nods for money.
Yep.
Right? There are stipulations in their contracts when it comes to all-star nods and all NBA nods and all defense nods and all these things. And to your point about the voting, you have to get this stuff right or else you're costing these guys millions of dollars. So
Hall of Fame. I mean, there's Hall of Fame that goes in. There's so much that goes into it, which is why I'm like, you can't have this room for error that just allows for, they're just, it's different coaching minds, different, everybody, they're going to get it right most of the time because at the end of the day, the voting is going to account for what most people think and what most people agree. And I think we have enough to say that this might not and is not the best process for selecting all-stars.
Yeah. And look, I think everybody does have their own process, but the fact that it weighs so much, like you said, Hall of Fame, people look back at things, right? You look back at, like, I don't know, Pau Gasol. I don't know how many all-star games he has. I have no idea. Maybe he has like 7 or 8. You look back at that and you're like, oh, wow, Pau Gasol, 7, 8-time all-star, 2-time NBA champion. This is awesome. He's a great player, right? This is, you know, people, fans of the game, kids in 20 years will go back and look at Pascal Siakam and Julius Randle and be like, these guys, they're relatively close. And that might not have been the case, you know?
Yeah, that's
so
crazy when you put it like that.
Right? I just think it's tough. It's weird that we put so much weight into these all-star votes, and then the voting skews consistently and habitually. So let's go to the West. I think we've talked enough about the East because I don't want to get myself even more mad. The Western Conference reserves: Paul George, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jaren Jackson Jr., Damian Lillard, Lauri Markkanen, John Morant, and Domantas Sabonis. Now, some people will say there was no De'Aaron Fox. Others will say no Anthony Edwards was crazy. I think Edwards, I would say he's working through a lot of kinks of his game. I know the Timberwolves have started to climb the Western Conference rankings a little bit more. I believe they're in the top 6 right now. They're doing well. And a lot of that is because of Ant. It's a huge part of it. I don't think Ant is as much in the conversation for snub as De'Aaron Fox is, especially because of how the Kings have looked this year, especially with, him being the most clutch player in the NBA this season. The way he has just carried them in fourth quarters has been significant and massive to see. He has turned a corner in his game. And I think obviously Domantas Sabonis has unlocked that. Mike Brown has unlocked that. There's a lot of reasons for that. Don't get me wrong. But Fox is having an excellent season. The Kings are winning a lot of games because of it. I think there's a very good reason to say that Fox should have made it over a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because, look, Jaren Jackson Jr. missed a bunch of games. He was out for the start of the year. And yes, he's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year if he stays healthy for the rest of the season. But that doesn't necessarily mean he should be an all-star this year. But hey, don't get me wrong. I wrote about Jaren Jackson Jr. I think he's going to be a Defensive Player of the Year winner this season. I think he should have won it last year. And I think it's awesome that he's getting an all-star nod because defense is getting recognized in the all-star game. That is a sight to behold, right, Lauren?
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
I think it's great. But in terms of deserving, in terms of games played, in terms of looking at it from the bigger picture, what this might mean money-wise and whatnot, I think when you look back, you'll say De'Aaron Fox should have made the All-Star game. And when you have to look at those list of players and see who shouldn't have, you probably will look at Jaren Jackson Jr. and the amount of games that he's missed and say, I don't know about that one, Chief. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The Jaren Jackson and the De'Aaron Fox one is definitely the one that I kind of had the most, I guess, frustration with because to me, De'Aaron Fox, this is the best year of his career. He's averaging 24, 6, and 4 while shooting 50% from the field. I really don't know. And their team is they're still third, I believe. Yeah, they're third in the West. Yeah. I really don't know what more you have to do at that point to make the All-Star team.
I mean, look, by the way, it was an uphill battle for Fox to make it anyways because
That's
the
true.
guard
That's
spots.
right. Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, right?
Close.
The guard spots are tough. I mean, between Devin Booker didn't even make it, and Booker was playing like an All-NBA player before he got hurt. Obviously, games played a factor there, but it didn't play a factor with Jaren Jackson Jr., I guess.
I know. I don't get it. I don't get it.
I don't understand it. And this goes back to what we were saying off the top, where it's like there is no consistency when it comes to this voting. So I don't know if this is I don't know if like these selections are outrageous enough for the NBA to decide that they're going to approach the All-Star voting in a different way. I think the NBA probably enjoys the fact that we talk about these votes and these conversations and these snubs because it is revenue right into their pocket.
It's true.
But at the same time, I think, when there are so many contract stipulations in this, when it's legacies and Hall of Fame nods and all that stuff that comes into consideration with this, it would be asinine of the NBA to not figure out a way to make voting a little bit more consistent.
Yeah.
I even give it a threshold of games. You have to play a minimum of 75% of your games by this time in order to be eligible to be an All-Star. That's it. Mm-hmm. Even if you were to just add that specific thing, it would make things 100% easier.
It would.
Can we just take a moment of silence for frustration? Can we do the SpongeBob meme where it's like 5 minutes later and we're just crying?
That's kind of where I'm at this point. I will say there was one thing, and it was the first thing that caught my eye when the West reserves were announced. And the first thing that my eye went to was the fact that Lauri Markkanen made it. And I was very glad to see that, because he was kind of the number one that I was like, I know it's in Utah, but I'm just so worried he's going to get snubbed. Very similar to last year with Cleveland.
Right.
And kind of looking at, we want to make sure that, So I was really glad to see that he made it. Sabonis too. I mean, we spoke on the resume, but these are two guys that you kind of wouldn't be surprised if they got snubbed. And so
yeah.
I was very glad to see them make it. And I think we were pretty on board with everyone else that was there. I think the Paul George of it all, I might have disagreed a little bit on that.
Yeah, we were flipping between him and Dame in our All-Star stuff. Yeah.
So I mean, whatever. There are bigger issues in all of this than Paul George making the All-Star team. But I think with all of this, you gotta be able to find because one thing that I always come back to is, for the NBA as a business, what is beneficial for them to actually improve versus, well, maybe we'll turn a little bit of a blind eye if it means we can maximize on this revenue or this dollar amount. And the All-Star, I think a bad example of this could be this All-Star debacle, because it does generate a lot of revenue and a lot of conversations that are had, and it turns into a whole production with the
draft.
All of it. It's a whole thing. And so this could be a bad example. I think a good example is our last conversation where we talked about the officiating problem and overall improving the quality of the product that you're seeing. So sometimes that's one big kind of facet that I'm always wondering, or kind of like, if I take a step back, can I realistically see this being improved? JJ Redick said today, why are we not expanding the All-Star roster? You've got guys, and I believe the two examples that I saw that even Jason Gallagher of the Old Man and the Three was talking about, said that you're going to have guys that are averaging, I believe, like 24, 6 and are shooting 50% from the field, and they're not going to make the All-Star game. That's crazy. We've expanded the league. We need to expand the roster. And I think that that's the key right there. You got to continue to evolve. If there are going to be inconsistencies, or you don't want to take that, quote unquote power away from the coaches, I don't want to say that that's fine, but like, if that, then maybe look elsewhere to try and remedy some of these things. Because if at the end of the day, this is just essentially a fan event, but at the end of the day, you also have guys that are, like you talk about, legacy, money, bonuses, whatever the case may be. Why not? What's the case against not expanding the roster? Does it take away from the importance of getting the All-Star nod? Personally, I don't think it does, because we're seeing how much the talent pool, like you mentioned earlier, is just continuing to grow and evolve and increase. So to me, it's only going to get more competitive, and ultimately the answer will be to expand the roster. That just makes the most sense to me.
You know what, Lauren? That is a excellent freaking point. I think for all of the evolution we've talked about when it comes to the NBA, all of the, look at the 3-point shot that is looking like this, look at the way we are talking about positionless basketball and how the on-court product has evolved. I think the off-court stuff has to evolve just as much with it. And, like you said, look, they expanded All-NBA. I believe a very long time ago, it used to be 2 All-NBA teams. They added a third All-NBA team when they started to expand. They should probably have a third All-Defense team, if we're being honest, but they only have 2. They should have a third so like there are ways that they can incorporate this and make this a little bit easier to, one, get these contract incentives, but also make it so that there aren't these egregious things that happen with voting. Yeah. I think if we look back at the East and West reserves, it looks like the East is crazier than the West in terms of who made it and who didn't.
Definitely.
Yeah. So look, we appreciate everybody who has tapped into our rant, our rambling right now for the All-Star conversation. We are going to kind of pivot here and talk about some trade discussion, because while the All-Star game is fun and it's happening in a couple weeks, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be there in Salt Lake City watching it and covering it. The other aspect of this is the trade deadline. The trade deadline that's going to happen in T-minus 7 days. We are 1 week away from the trade deadline. Actually, less than 7 days, because it is it'll be at 3 p.m. on Thursday, December 9th. So a little bit earlier than 7 days. It'll be like 6 days and however many hours that is. I don't know. I'm not that good at math, ladies and gentlemen. That is the accountant here, Lauren Gunn.
And it is after hours, so do not expect me to be whipping out any quick math right now. Man.
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of discussions on the trade front right now. I think as a good friend of the podcast, Trillbro Dude, it always says there's a lot of slop going around right now in terms of rumors and trade mills and trade machine screenshots and whatnot. There's just a lot of that going around on Twitter right now. Yeah. And I think the topic of conversation, the centerpiece of it all, has become OG Anunoby. Mm-hmm. I think, I wrote an article earlier today kind of illustrating why Anunoby has become the top prize in the trade deadline, why he has the value that he has currently, and why the Raptors are seeking so much for him. I think the more interesting, maybe not more interesting, because the article was pretty interesting, I'm not going to lie to you, but maybe maybe the other side of this is, what do these trades look like? What kind of situation we can see? Because I think Memphis has been rumored, Indiana has been rumored, Phoenix has been rumored, the New Orleans Pelicans have been rumored, even to a certain degree the New York Knicks have been rumored. So there are a lot of suitors for a guy like OG Anunoby. He is your prototypical 3-and-D wing who has shown flashes of potentially doing a little bit more than that. He is an elite defender, was probably in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year earlier in the season, but that's slipped a lot because of the Raptors also slipping in terms of their record and defensive stanchion. So I think he's a guy who is one of the premier wing defenders in the league, guy that you could ask to guard literally anybody. As a person who's covered him for the last couple of years, he's a person that the Raptors have thrown on Nikola Jokic. He's a guy who the Raptors have thrown on Donovan Mitchell. He's a guy who the Raptors have thrown on Giannis Antetokounmpo, and all three of those players play entirely different positions, and they play in entirely different ways. So the fact that Anunoby is such a versatile defender is why these teams are going after him. The offensive side of the ball, he's a good shooter, deadly three-point shooter. He can knock down the shot, especially when it's a catch and shoot. I think he's gotten better at driving the ball, using his strength, making passes. I think these areas of game are obviously things that he's growing in, but he has shown development in those areas as well. He's a free agent in 2024, although he does have a player option, but he's absolutely going to opt out of that. He will be a free agent in 2024. And that means he's up for a pretty big payday. So that's another aspect of this that we'll have to consider. But with that type of setting the table, like I'm Jalen Brunson and you're Julius Randle, tell me, Lauren, not to call you Julius Randle.
That hurts. Do we have to go there?
As soon as I said it, I was like, oh, that's not a good comp.
It's too soon.
Yeah, it's too soon. But no, look, with all that being said, what team pops out to you the most when it comes to Anunoby? Which place, either in terms of realistic or in terms of like what the package can be? What do you think? What do you think kind of pops out to you the most?
It's kind of funny because I just keep going to New Orleans. I keep going back to New Orleans, and a lot of it has to do with how much Willie Green likes those, not just 3-and-D wings, but these wings that are big and can guard and are really versatile, can guard different positions. And while you have seen the potential from OG and you kind of have an idea of what he could be and all that, and it looks great for the team that could ultimately get him and for him as well in terms of the payday.
Yeah.
He looks like he would fit very well with New Orleans and kind of this versatile group that they've got. And then also, I think I even mentioned before about them having times when Brandon Ingram isn't available, Zion isn't available. Okay, well, who's somebody that you can reasonably expect to step up? I absolutely think OG is one of those guys, and they have the young guy. They have young. I don't want to say the young guys, but they have young pieces plus picks. And so
I would argue they have the young guys, honestly. I mean,
you would.
Yeah, because like when you look at the teams that I mentioned in a Phoenix, in a Memphis, in a New Orleans, right? Mm-hmm. I think the blue chip prospects are on New Orleans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I agree. And if I'm Toronto, I want Herb Jones. That's who I want. But everything that I hear about New Orleans and how much, I mean, they love Herb Jones so much. And so in my mind, I don't see, he could get moved. I'm not going to say something's impossible because I learned that lesson. But it's hard for me to envision him getting moved here. I think, I mean, there's been a little bit, I think there were some articles that maybe even dropped today saying that Memphis doesn't want New Orleans to get OG and New Orleans doesn't want Memphis to get OG. And that could ultimately end up being the case. That's where I kind of see New York coming in. That's where that makes sense to me because they also have picks and young guys that I think are interesting. But for New Orleans, they have more reasons to go get someone like OG than Memphis, to me, in my opinion. And so that's where I kind of look. And so then I kind of am like, okay, well, do you have interest in a Trey Murphy, this could be a hot take, but I don't see them moving Dyson Daniels for this either. I think that they would rather let somebody else win and have it, especially if it's not Memphis, if it means they get to hold on to Herb Jones, hold on to Dyson Daniels. I
think if they had to take a pick between Dyson, Trey, and Herb, they would probably pick Herb. But that's not saying much because I think they value all three.
Yeah,
so it's like if you're including one of those guys into the deal for Anunoby, and I do think Herb probably makes the most sense. Although if you ask Raptors fans, I'm sure they'll ask you, they'll want you to take Dyson Daniels. and you know, actually this is not necessarily news or rumors or anything like that, but from my understanding, from what I've heard, is that the Raptors were actually looking to trade up in the draft in order to take Dyson Daniels. They were interested in drafting Dyson Daniels. So that's a guy who has been on their radar for a considerable amount of time. That's
he would fit
a guy,
really well.
Right? Yeah, and reportedly the chip that was going to be going the other way, which was to Portland at the time for the 8th pick, was OG Anunoby. I don't know if that gets revisited. I don't know if New Orleans is as interested in that situation anymore. And, you know, for all the context of what happens this year and what happens in the future, I'm not sure if New Orleans would like to make that win now move right now, given the fact that Ingram is dealing with some injuries and kind of coming back for the toe stuff. Zion with the hamstring injury and like, hey, is this the season we should go all in on? Maybe they don't need to, right?
Yeah, That's kind of where I'm at too, which is why I think the New York of it all is very fascinating because when I look at them, I'm like, okay, you've got Quickly and you've got Toppin. To me, those are the two guys that if you're going to go in on an OG move, you're going to have to move one of those guys. Maybe, I mean, I don't see them moving both. Who knows? Who knows at this point?
Do you think they would include or
Quentin?
Yeah. Do you think that would be even? I mean, look, he apparently wasn't in discussions for Donovan Mitchell. So I mean,
that's what's so crazy to me because without getting too much into it, I had heard some things that may have been on the table, but I don't want to get into too much. I don't want to get into
we got sources says here. We got sources says here, folks.
I think with Quentin, they love him internally, but I also think that he, out of Quickly Toppin, is the least likely to get kind of similar to what Dyson. We're talking about with exactly. Right. So to me, I think it is going to come down to the Suns, Pelicans, and then he just completely distracted me.
Winston ruined
I thought he was going to knock that whole thing over, and I was like, oh, God, just what I need right now. So I think the Suns are the kind of the wild card in there, the Pelicans, the Knicks, and
the Grizzlies, right? That's the team.
Jesus.
It was right there. I had to help you out. It's okay.
My brain is just like jumbled, but yeah, I don't know. I think he's getting moved. I think it's gonna be really interesting to see kind of how much they heat up, and then to kind of look back after the fact and be like, oh, that clearly came from the Raptors,
right,
front office, and just kind of gauge what that return ends up being. Because as of right now, you 100% you believe he's getting moved, or you think?
I think with every passing day, my percentage of chance that OG Anunoby gets moved increases.
Okay.
I think, last week you could have asked me and I was at 40%. Right now I'm probably at 60%. Okay. And I think that's only going to get higher and higher as things continue. The only reason I say that is because of what I have heard, and two, what has been registered in the news cycle when it comes to his dissatisfaction and him wanting to have a bigger role. All of these things, while if you're a Raptors fan right now and refuting all of those rumors, I think you would be lying to yourself because, and I say I say that out of love. I really do say that. Yeah, I do. Look, Raptors fans, we have a little bit of an edge to us. I think that's clear to say. But when it comes to how many times this rumor has been mentioned of him being dissatisfied or him wanting a bigger role, at some point you have to believe the fact that there's 7 different reports of this coming out, whether it's CJ McCollum mentioning it on his podcast or Jake Fisher mentioning it last summer, and then Chris Haynes reporting on it literally today. So I think in terms of, verifying the dissatisfaction of OG Anunoby, I think we've kind of seen that it's true at this point. And when it comes to what the Raptors can do to maybe amend that, maybe fix the situation, maybe find a bigger role for them, there are other ways other than trading him. I think maybe if they decided, we kind of talked about this offline, Lauren, but maybe if the Raptors did in fact decide to move Pascal Siakam and do a hard reset, now Anunoby is a guy that can be featured more often, especially because the core moving forward would be Precious, OG, Scotty, Gary Trent Jr. Now, these are all guys under the age of 25 years old. So to me, it's like, look, there's multiple ways the Raptors can go about this, but the way that it's looking they're going to approach this is trading Anunoby, hoping that the value they recoup back, which, by the way, they're asking for a lot. Yeah. And I think they're right in asking for a lot.
I agree. I think so too.
Because they know how important this trade is. This is potentially a franchise-altering move for them because of the fact of how much OG, how important he is to their franchise.
Yeah.
We can talk about the Pascal Siakam and the Scotty Barnes of it all, but OG is sort of the connective stopgap between Pascal, who is 28, 29 years old and dead in his prime, and Scotty, who is 20, 21 years old and still trying to figure it out. Yeah. OG is the guy right in the middle, 25 years old. He's the guy who kind of splits the difference. He's the guy that you can hopefully plug and play with either of those quote-unquote cores. So to move off of him means a fundamental change in the way this team is going to be constructed. So you do have to hope to get value back. You do hope to get a blue-chip prospect like a Dyson Daniels.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So I'm not sure which way they go, but I imagine from the news that we've been hearing and the weeks, the couple of days, that are going to follow, I imagine that this will be a bidding war. And I imagine that he is the blue chip guy to trade for this year. There is no other guy out there that is as big, unless the Raptors start mentioning Pascal Siakam in availability, right? There's no Zach LaVine from what I've heard. I don't think Zach LaVine is available. Sorry, Lauren.
Honestly, it's fine.
Yeah, but no, like there is no blue chip prospect like that. Sorry, not prospect, but like superstar or star available. There is none of that. So then it all comes down to OG, and with the amount of parity we've seen in the NBA, he really could mean the difference between either winning an NBA championship or having a conference finals run. For a team like the Grizzlies that might need that extra defensive punch, might need that extra shooting in the playoffs. I mean, you have the extra picks. You have the Warriors pick in 2024. You have a litany of prospects to add to kind of sweeten the pot. The same thing applies to the New Orleans Pelicans. The same thing applies to the Phoenix Suns. So to me, you're looking at a situation where there are teams with an abundance of prospects and picks that are interested in getting this player that could potentially mean an NBA championship. And for all three franchises, Phoenix, New Orleans, Memphis, would mean the first NBA championship for that franchise. Yeah. I think that is a huge deal. I think that's also, it puts the Raptors in a position of leverage. It puts them in a position where it's like, look, man, we know how much this guy we have means to what you guys can do this year. So yeah, we want your Dyson Daniels. We want your DeAndre Ayton. We want your Zaire Williams plus Warriors pick. We want your Quentin Grimes.
I completely agree. I think that is exactly why. I mean, part of it is the fact that, and I think that maybe that's part of why the Raptors have maybe been a little bit more open about this situation. I could be completely wrong there. That's just my own personal speculation in terms of how open the West is specifically when we're talking about all three of those suitors. The kind of biggest three are all in the Western Conference. We've been talking for weeks about how close this Western Conference is, and you just said it, what it could mean for the difference in letting him go somewhere else or being the team to say, you know what, we're pushing those chips in. And so in that regard, that's why I'm like, I don't want to say anything's impossible, because you might just have a team say, well, if this was a year ago, there was no way I was trading, Herb Jones, or there was no way that I was going to consider even moving Ayton for something like this.
Right.
But now I think you might find yourself in a position where it's like, well, maybe we're not, if you're the Pelicans, for example, maybe we're really not inclined to move from someone like Dyson Daniels or Herb Jones or whatever the case may be. But for this situation, it's time to, it's not all going to be 100% wins, home runs every single time. You've got to give a little to get a little. So I won't be surprised if we see somebody that, it's not similar to Sabonis and Halliburton, but something where you're like, whoa, I never saw that coming. And then all of a sudden it's happened. That with this specific scenario with the suitors and what it could mean for the team that gets him, it will not surprise me if a name comes out of the blue that we're just like, whoa, that consistently or not consistently, that kind significantly of changes the landscape of the West or the East, but most likely the West. Yeah,
and actually, funny you mentioned that. I do think it would kind of best serve the Raptors' interest to not trade him to the Eastern Conference, because that's a guy, one, you'd have to face 4 times a year, and two, if you're considering like, look, trading it to the Knicks or the Pacers or any other team in the East, those are the teams you're going to be competing against for the next decade plus. You don't want to have to give them something and, kind of let them have that advantage. So I do think it kind of best serves them to be looking out West, to be looking at the Memphises, the New Orleans, the Phoenixes of this situation and seeing how much they can kind of pull from them. I will say, I think at the end of the day, after having this conversation and just from speaking to other people, I think I'm more and more confident that he ends up getting moved. Who else ends up getting moved on the Raptors is maybe even a bigger question to me. Is it going to be Fred VanVleet? Is it going to be Gary Trent Jr.? Is it going to maybe even be Pascal Siakam? I very much so doubt the Siakam situation. I think it would take, if the OG situation is a king's ransom, I'm not sure what a Siakam situation would be called. Yeah. And I don't even know if there's a team out there that has an offer that kind of makes sense.
I don't think so either.
I think it's funny because you probably talk to a Pelicans fan or a Grizzlies fan, and the package they would give you for the package the Raptors are looking for OG is probably the package they would be willing to give you for Pascal Siakam, right?
And that's crazy to me. To me, that's just you either watch him or you don't. And if you either watch him or you don't, and if you don't watch him, that's fine. that's fine. But if you watch him, there's no way.
Yeah, you either have or you have not watched the games. And look, we just got through talking about Siakam and the All-Star recognition that he probably deserved, and even though he was snubbed, I think there's a major difference between having Siakam, who is a top 20 player, and Anunoby, who is a fringe top 50 player in the NBA, despite the fact that he is a Defensive Player of the Year quality type of defender. I think he fits in and fits the build for a lot of the teams that we mentioned, whether it's a Memphis, whether it's a New Orleans, whether it's a Phoenix. And at the end of the day, that's probably what's going to make it be this massive haul for them. I want to switch to your team. We have talked about my guys way too much today, and we need to talk about yours a little bit. So this Christian
Wood,
All-Stars. Yeah. Let's talk about Christian Wood, Lauren. If I was kind of like a month ago, I would have said, man, there is no way Christian Wood doesn't sign an extension with the Mavericks. I would have said there is no way in hell he doesn't sign an extension with the Mavericks. And now it's looking like he will not sign an extension with the Dallas Mavericks. He's having a pretty damn good year. He's slotted into the starting lineup since Maxi Kleber got injured. I want to get your perspective on this, because what is the thought process for Wood? What is the thought process for the Mavericks? What might this mean? It maybe means that he could get traded in the next couple of days. So just tell me where your head's at, and tell me where you think the Mavericks are with Christian Wood.
Yeah, so there's a lot of layers to it. I am also shocked that this has gone the way it has. Personally, I do think that he's going to get moved in the next week, really, because it's looking like he's going to walk. To me, from everything that I've heard, it does not look like a situation where he's going to go to free agency, test the market, and then stick around. That's not what it looks like to me. So I do expect him to get moved. For what? I really don't know. His salary is just under $15 million. I don't really know that they're going to get any value. I think they're going to get something. I think you're going to have teams out there that are like, hey, we could stand to add that. And even if it's just a short-term rental, that could be the potential difference maker, especially for someone like Denver, which the money matching is a little tricky there. But for a team that's looking to just make a little addition that could really potentially change things for them, even in the short term.
I hadn't even considered Denver. That is really interesting. Okay.
I think it's could be very interesting, but to the money that it would take to move. I mean, you could be looking at a Ish Smith, Bones, and Jeff Green. And I don't think they want to move Jeff Green, but I think
I will tell you right now, from the amount of games that I've watched, Nuggets games, and they're pretty up there on my League Pass rankings. I will tell you right now that it is not a foregone conclusion that Jeff Green should be on that team anymore. So I will say, if it's a Bones Christian Wood swap, that would interest the heck out of me for both sides. I think that is an awesome guy to throw next to Luka. Just because of the offensive punch, I think that makes tons of sense. I think in terms of what that means for the Mavericks, they get a backup big, although not a defensive-minded backup big. Maybe more of a guy who can replicate some of the offensive punch that Jokic gives you. That's very interesting to me. I think
Denver's a little sneaky there. I think when I look around at teams that I could see making a case for why they should trade or buy low on Christian Wood, there are a decent number of teams out there that are either looking to win now, are looking to just be competitive, or are looking to try and solidify a core moving forward, or even put something together. And a good example of that is the Charlotte Hornets. So I think that there are going to be lots of suitors in terms of the return value being something crazy. I'm kind of at the point where that would surprise me. I'm hoping for it, and I think Nico, I want to give him some props. I think he's shown that he's multiple times made deals that have been very favorable for the Dallas Mavericks, in terms of trading for Jaden Hardy, trading for even Christian Wood back for what they offered for him, and even the Spencer Dinwiddie trade. That was something that panned out well for Dallas. So I'm choosing to have faith in him, to see the situation with Christian Wood between the Mavs and him and his side of things kind of go the way it has. I don't think that there are hard feelings. That's not what my understanding of the situation, but I do think that they're, in terms of where they see their future, maybe the dollar amount, I think that there's just there's a disconnect there. And so, for that reason, I kind of think that Dallas is looking at their roster. I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith, there's been a lot of talk there lately. If you're paying attention to Dallas, or, you kind of hear what they have to say, there's no world in which they move Dorian Finney-Smith because of how close he is to Luka, unless it's for some crazy deal, which just doesn't seem to be out there right now. Yeah. So I don't see him getting moved. They're not moving Maxey. They're not, a lot of these guys, they are just not going to move right now if they can't put them all together and then attach a ton of picks to go get something serious. So who does that leave? That kind of leaves Christian Wood. And like I said, I think I tweeted it out earlier, even 2 weeks ago, I would have not said that they were in a position to even consider moving on from Christian Wood. But now, with kind of how things are looking with even the contract extension conversation, or like deadline coming up, and kind of the fact that there hasn't really been a whole lot of momentum building there. And then you've got Tim McMahon going on the low post saying, well, if anybody's going to get moved from Dallas, it's probably Christian Wood. And then you've got Zach Lowe saying, well, if an extension was going to happen, it probably would have already happened by now.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's true. So I think for Dallas, this is going to be their opportunity to kind of make that around the margins move to try and set themselves up. And that's why I think a Denver package could be really intriguing if you're going to go get someone like Bones, or even, I mean, there are so many potential options out there. They could even try and use this to pair with maybe like a Reggie Bullock contract and get something back that's maybe even not a great contract, something but brings in draft assets. Like they're going to have options if they do decide to move on from Christian Wood. I do think that they're going to have options. But I just don't know how reasonable it is to expect something that's going to significantly improve this team, and what that will mean for Luka and his, happiness level. I'm not sure. But I think if you're a Mavs fan and you're listening to this, you got to be thinking about the summer. It's the summer. We've got to wait till summer, because I think it's pretty obvious that this season is somewhat of a wash. And you just got to kind of get there, because it's not looking good right now. It's really not.
It always felt like this was sort of a patchwork season, kind of just a season to get through for the Dallas Mavericks.
Even from the beginning.
Right, even from the beginning, just because of the draft capital and, like, hey, in the summer they will have more options in terms of what they can trade. I think this was very much so a stopgap year. And, that's hard to sell if you're talking to Luka Doncic, because Luka Doncic is ready to win an NBA championship today, actually. So I personally... I think it's a tough situation for the Raptors. Yeah, it is also a tough situation for the Raptors. It's a tough situation for the Mavericks front office to maneuver, because you have a player who is ready to win now, but you also don't have the assets to go out and get him a win now player. Nope. And you won't have those assets until this summer. I wonder if there's a way for the Mavericks to get maybe a first for Christian Wood and take a step back that way. Like, let's say if Portland offers up a first for Christian Wood, or if Brooklyn offers up a first for Christian Wood, two teams that might need a little bit more depth, add a little bit more size to them. Even Denver, like you mentioned, what if they're like, okay, we're not interested in giving up Bones, but we'll give you our 2029 first. I think, I'm not sure how you would sell Luka on that, but I think in terms of overall team building, that makes a ton of sense for me.
It does. And even to give it back to Tim McMahon and Zach Lowe, they said, as of right now, I think that they can pretty much get back what they got, what they gave for him, which was a bunch of role players on really small salaries that weren't cracking the rotation, and then a very late first round.
Very late.
And so that's why I think, you're going to be looking at a future first and then maybe just some random salary match. That's kind of what I'm anticipating, because in terms of, if you're going to look at a current, I don't want to say win now, but somebody that can contribute to a playoff. Like
a rotation player.
Yeah, like a rotation player on a playoff team. If that's what you're going to look for, somebody that's making around $15 million, the conversation for guys that are available making that much money, they're either way overvalued or their contracts are bad because it's a ton of years and they're just 3-and-D. Like it's not an easy conversation there, which is why it makes the most sense to me. And you're going to have the most options for some of these teams that could give two craps about 2029. They don't care. They're ready to win now. And that's kind of where I see the most likely kind of result.
Say, yeah, I get it. I will say, I think like it would be in the Mavs' interest to potentially sign Christian Wood to a friendly deal so that in the summer, now you have a package where it's like, okay, Zach LaVine wants out. Okay, cool. We'll give you Christian Wood, Dorian Finney-Smith, Josh Green, multiple first-round picks. Here you go. That's would I don't know if that entices you as a Mavericks person. I don't know if that's too much, and I'm not sure if like even the Bulls from their perspective are like we can probably we can probably do better than that. I don't know. I have no idea, but I'm just saying like adding Wood to the Finney-Smith, Josh Green, Hardy plus picks package makes things a little bit more enticing if you're 100%. Going out and getting that complimentary player. So I don't know. I feel like the Mavs should be incentivized to get that deal done, but
I think so too, even if that means paying him a little bit more than you might want to. But to me, it certainly seems like that deal is just not going to get done.
Oh man, what a day! What a day! What a day! We started
Lord,
it
somebody
off.
pour me a drink.
Yeah, I know. Look, we started it off depressed and annoyed and mad, and we are going to end it off depressed and annoyed and mad. We're infuriated, folks. Pascal Siakam is not an all-star. Jalen Brunson is not an all-star. The teams that we respectively cover are in disarray, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. So listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you've listened to this is a somber episode of the Objective Basketball Podcast. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We thank you guys for listening to our spiels. Lauren, I thank you so much for being sad with me. Shout out to Winston, who is whining right now. You're a real
he gets
one.
it. He feels the energy.
He understands it. Yeah, he feels it. He's with us on this. You know, cats, I don't know if cats are like empathizers. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no clue whatsoever. But shout out to the cat, Winston, chilling in the background. We appreciate you guys tuning in to the Objective Basketball Podcast. We will see you later. Bye-bye.
Follow hosts at Just S Baraheni on all socials and at The Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.